Good morning.
Recording in progress.
Good morning. This is a Board of County Commissioners Board of Work session. It is Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. It is 10:03 a.m. We're going to start off with introductions. We have our chair, Ty Menser, who is joining us virtually for this meeting. He is also representing us at the Washington State Insurance Fund meeting. So thank you for pulling double duty today, Chair Menser. And then Vice Chair Wayne Fournier also joining us virtually. He will be joining us in the boardroom shortly. In the boardroom, we have Commissioner Grant to my left, as well as Commissioner Klaus, and I am Commissioner Carolina Mejia. Also, we have County Manager Leonard Hernandez, as well as Assistant County Manager Jennifer Walker and Assistant County Manager Josh Cummings. So we'll go ahead. Written public comment may be received up to 2 hours in advance of the meeting and will be distributed to the Board of County Commissioners. Action may be taken at this meeting. This meeting is being live streamed to the Thurston County YouTube channel. So we'll start off with item 2, which is .gov domain migration project, and we have Sherry Ilg, Director for IT, who's going to be presenting this item.
Sherry.
Good morning. Hello, Sherry Ilg, IT Director. This is Evan Hallmark, my network supervisor. And we want to talk to you briefly about a potentially chaotic, confusing, and disrupting project that we
Okay,
have
that is
to
not
do.
the right way.
We're gonna make sure it's not like that. Okay, do I do this?
And it may take just a second to click in, but
Which
just.
one is it? The forward? I'm the technical guru at this table, right?
Presentation's off to a great start, Sherry.
Yes. All right, so as a result of the Washington Senate Bill 5014, all counties must migrate to the .gov domain. We are currently using co.thurston.wa.us, and we must move to .gov by July of 2027. Okay, it is a major change, and that's why we're starting to work on it now, so we can avoid as much chaos and disruption as possible. But migrating from one domain to another is not just changing the name, because we use our domain information for most of our authentication. You know, when you log in to anything and you just click login, that's because it's taking your county credentials and logging you into that system. So all of those have to be updated. There are a lot of applications that have hard-coded domain names that we have to find them and reconfigure them. Data integrity and access control. There's file shares. I don't want to get too technical, but file shares, databases, and a lot of permissions are often referencing domain accounts. And then our email, of course, this is going to require everybody to change their email address. And there's other Azure Active Directory dependencies.
So basically a lot of work on the back end so that what we'll see is our email address changing. But to get to that point, there's a lot of work that's going in on the back end by
Yes.
our IT staff.
And of course, the impact that Sherry has identified is real in that a lot of things are tied to our email address, including our subscriptions, our passwords, our access. So it's a disruptive,
Can be disruptive.
and a disruptive process.
I just want to be open and honest. It can be very disruptive. All right, we're gonna do our best to make it not though. Okay, so communication, of course, is gonna be really, really important. Internally, it will help our employees adjust and know what's coming when. And so we'll have a very robust communication plan. And then externally, if we don't do a good job of communicating, it really can impact our reputation with our constituents, because if we don't tell them we're changing our email address, they might get cranky. All right. So this is the part where I say it could be disruptive or chaotic. The things that can go wrong, we could get users locked out of their accounts, broken applications, data loss or corruption, email outages, security gaps. If it were to crash, it would probably take us a very lengthy time to sort it all out and get it back up and running, which is why we're starting so early. So we're planning on a phased approach. We've already started phase 0, collecting requirements, reaching out to a vendor who's done this work before for assistance, and then applied for grant funding to help pay for the first phase of this project. Phase 1, readiness and planning. Phase 2, preparation, and phase 3 will be the full migration and validation. So we were awarded $194,000 in grant funding to help us pay for this work. It's not gonna be enough for the entire project, but it will get us through phase 1. We contacted an experienced vendor. They've done this for counties and colleges, other complicated organizations. And they provided us our first our proposal for the phase 1, which is supposed to cost $149,500. We're planning on doing this work January through April. We've already started, so the dates don't seem correct, but we've already started. We're gonna set this phase is gonna set the foundation. Without a clear understanding of the dependencies and risks, the migration could cause widespread outages. So our planning ensures resources, timelines, and contingencies are in place to minimize disruption. We are going to assess the current environment, inventory users, devices, applications, and map all of those dependencies, what's depending on what. And then we're going to identify the critical systems and any potential failure points, and then create the strategy and the timeline and secure executive sponsorship. Any questions about that? Okay. Phase 2, we will begin preparation. Out of phase 1, we should get like a plan of where we should start. We should start with whatever it is. And so at phase 2 is when we're gonna start preparing for the change. We have to configure our new domain controllers. We have to make a lot of changes behind the scenes, so when we apply them, the infrastructure is ready to go. And we're anticipating that's gonna last through December. And then phase 3 will be the full migration and validation. Executing it, we need to move all the accounts to the new domain. We need to validate and confirm that all of the expected applications are still running like they should be. And then address any post-migration problems quickly and ensure compliance and audit readiness. So validation is critical to confirm success and avoid any lingering security or operational issues. So potential risk, of course, is impacted business operations. We don't know what the vendor will charge us for the entire project. We only know what he's gonna charge us, what they're gonna charge us for phase 1. They can't even guess what it's gonna cost until they get in and get their arms around everything we're talking about. The timeline, we're anticipating that we can make it within the timeline, but there's a lot going on, And then change management and user impact. I think that's our biggest risk, and the one we need to pay really, really close attention to is how the people receiving this information, so they're prepared for the change when it takes effect. All right. Any questions?
Okay, can we stop sharing the screen so I can see? Any questions? I have a couple. So, no? I'm not seeing any online. Okay, Sherry. I'm not even gonna go into the intent of the bill, piece. The grant funding piece was, one of the areas I had a question about. Who was this funding, if you could remind me, who made this funding available? Was it through?
It was the local, state and local cybersecurity grant. We've used them once before. We applied for it and we've been awarded, but I'll be bringing it to the board in 2 weeks, I think.
It'll be for board consideration adoption, accepting March 17th.
March 17th, yeah.
And so I'm wondering, I'm trying to see how to frame my questions because, you know, has there been any conversations that there is going to be additional funding for the impact that counties are going to have to pay out of general fund, I'm imagining, to transition into this new system?
No, there was no additional funding, as far as I know, allocated for this.
So it was an unfunded mandate?
Yes.
Okay. And then, my next concern is basically as we're transitioning into this and not knowing the full estimate of the cost of the full project, yet, you know, we're on the hook to transition by 2027. Is there a reason why the vendor can't give an estimate on how much we need to prepare for?
I think it's because they don't understand what's under the covers, right? How many applications are we talking about? How many end user are we talking about? How many devices? So until they get a better picture of the breadth of the work, then they probably wouldn't be comfortable giving us any sort of quote.
Okay. And so once they're through with the phase one is when they'll be able to tell us the remaining cost for.
Yes, and phase one with the vendor includes a report out, a summary report out to the board if you guys would like that.
I'm wondering if this is something that we can add or just flag for WASAC. And I'm looking towards staff where might be a good idea to go back to the state and just give them the full rundown of the cost of what it's costing counties.
Yeah,
I'm sure we're not the only ones that is having to go through this transition.
yeah, we can bring that up to the executive director. And also, we can bring it up when all the other county administrators get together.
And we did provide feedback during the proposed legislation process as well.
So one of my next questions is, you know, kind of through the phases, we're talking about kind of that internal and then, you know, dealing with the stakeholders. And I'm wondering, is there going to be an external facing change for the public? And is that like phase 4 of this, where it's gonna be a marketing and education piece for the public?
I think as we get started communicating it internally, we will also be communicating externally because any old email addresses will no longer work. Luckily, our website is also already the thurstoncountywa.gov domain. We changed that when we upgraded our website a couple years ago. So that won't be impacted, but it's mostly external facing, it's mostly email addresses, and we've got some web applications that'll be impacted. But yes, we should start communicating it externally, internally.
As a part of the communication plan that needs to be developed.
Perfect. Commissioner Menzer, I saw you popped in.
You pretty much covered my topics about the the unknowns of the cost. And I would just it's just another one of those examples of, you know, like when we're going through budget and we spend every dollar, you know, there's always stuff like this that comes up. This is an example of something that, you know, in every budget amendment, in every period of time, we have contingencies that we can't get around. There's nothing we can do about it, and we don't get funded for it, and we don't have money for it because we stretched every dollar to try to get money back to our offices and departments. So it's frustrating, but.
I will say though, yes, and looking for opportunities for grant funding. So the IT department did do that. I don't know if there'll be something in the future, but $194,000. So,
Yeah, I think to elaborate on Commissioner Mentor's comment, it's why it's hard to dial our budget down to the penny, because there's always unforeseen items. I mean, it's like what we were talking about in new employee orientation. The county is an extension of the state, so cities don't have the same level of requirements. But when the state enacts something, they're not asking us if we want to do this. They're telling us that we have to. So appreciate Commissioner Mejia flagging it as an unfunded mandate. If this wasn't a priority list of things to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on, I don't know that it would make the top 100.
Agreed.
So for us, it's not broken. And so there's no desire for us to fix it, but the state's requiring it. And I really appreciate staff going after grant funding, as Assistant County Manager said. And also Commissioner Mentor, you highlighting that there does need to be wiggle room in our budget to be able to address these things so that we don't go into deficit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll pass the baton over to Vice Chair.
You're doing fine. Next item, Veterans Program Funds.
As our public health team is coming up, I think now it's been a few months ago, we were talking about Veterans Fund, a different topic at a work session. The commissioners asked if they could get an overview. So really appreciate the team doing the hard work to put this together, and I'll hand it to you, Beth.
Yep, thank you. It was the December 9th meeting. Commissioner Mejia especially requested this, and so we'll cover the RFP process, which this was the first time we had a request for proposal process with the Veterans Assistance Fund. And then you all approved on December 16th the funding for the RFP. And so the purpose is to elicit creative ways to support the qualifying veterans in Thurston County. And at the end, we will also discuss spend down strategies and funding impacts of the Veterans Assistance Fund. So I'll turn it over to Mark Moffett now.
Good morning, Commissioners. We have, as you know, the fund balance for the veterans has grown. And so last year, the Veterans Advisory Board decided to do something more creative and to do an RFP, a general RFP. We've done an RFP in the past just for homeless shelter. This is our first one in a general way to elicit creative ideas from the public. So what we've done in the past, as the fund increases, we've tried to adapt and to spend that money and get it out to the indigent veterans. What we've done in the past was we expanded eligibility and limits. We also had a year and a half ago, our VAB, our Veteran Advisory Board, we did a strategic planning, and they identified two priorities, and one was housing and the other was marketing. A lot of people still don't know about our program or the Veterans the Lacey Veterans Hub in Lacey, where we work out of. So we wanted to expand that. Now this RFP we did it more as a pilot. It's a one-time funding between January 1st of this year to the end of the year. And we allotted $250,000 for this program. It was open between September 1st and September 30th of 2025. And we had 4 members of the advisory board go through all the applications and rank them based on priorities. So these are we only had 6 applications. The City of Lacey with the Lacey Veterans Hub, they requested $80,000 for a wheelchair lift van. They have 2 vans without the wheelchair lift, and they have volunteers that drive veterans throughout the county for their medical appointments. They'll go all the way up to American Lake, but they couldn't help people with wheelchairs. So that's what that request was for. Rebuilding Together, Thurston County, this is for critical home repairs to veteran-owned homes. Most of that would go to like ADA accessibility, whether they have to expand their bathrooms, they have to expand walkways for wheelchair accessibility. We had an application from the Thurston County Food Bank. And this was kind of adapted through the process. it was mainly for food for veterans, but we wanted an FTE for outreach as well. It wasn't just for them passively coming in, but to actually go out and help to encourage veterans to come in. And so they adapted that. And then the Association for Integrated Healing, it's holistic therapies for veterans. Disabled American Veterans, Chapter 41, requested office rent, utilities, and equipment. And then Operation Military Family had an application for a clubhouse similar to what we do at the hub. And these were the committee recommendations of VAB. They presented this to the advisory board in November, and they voted on this, and they voted for the top, those top three to move on, and that's what we brought to you. So Lacey Veterans Service Hub, they are in the process of wrapping that van. They're gonna have our logo on it as well, since we're sponsoring it. And I've requested that they do like a christening and invite the commissioners out for that as well. Rebuilding Together, Thurston County, that was one that we increased the amount that was originally requested. They asked for $9,400, but that would only help one veteran this year. So the advisory board recommended granting them $50,000 so they could help up to 10 veterans. And then they also
So they asked for 94 and you gave them 50? Nice.
Right, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, they saw a lot of value in that, because we do have a lot of veterans coming in that, you know, they don't have the money to fix their homes, to make them comfortable for their disabilities. And then the Thurston County Food Bank, so this would go to funds for personnel, facility, and operational costs to support indigent veterans. And then the bottom three, they did not support for various reasons. So the Association for Integrated Healing, they were requesting the entire amount. And it just wasn't one of the priorities for the advisory board. The DAV, Disabled American Veterans, although it was a small amount they requested, they didn't have, they're not set up to meet the requirements of the assistance program. So making sure that they are indigent, the income verification, and the characterization of discharge for the veteran. So they weren't set up for that. They may be set up for in the future, and then we can help them out. But currently, they were not able to meet those requirements. And then Operation Military Family, they're based out of, I think, Linwood. And so what they were asking for was, again, the full amount for a facility that's not here yet, and it's similar to what the Lacey Veterans Hub does. So the advisory board didn't see the merit in that at this time, especially since it's 1 year. It would take them probably the entire year just to get the location and set it up. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense for this funding year. Questions on that? That's all I have on the RFP itself. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fund.
I can't see total.
Oh, I'm sorry. Total awarded.
No, we just have to move that little box.
Total awarded, $282,800
Out of 250?
out of 250. And Commissioner Klaus brought that up in December. That was the addition for rebuilding families, to give them that extra 50. So we went over the 250.
It's part of the spin down
Yes,
discussion.
as part of the spend down of the fund itself. Thank you. All right, so the fund balance, as of this year, it's at $2.1 million. The strategies that we put in place in the past few years have not drawn down. It keeps growing. So we have a few strategies that we're going to implement this year with the consent of this board, of course. So we want to do a biennial community project grant. So this RFP that we just did, we want to expand that. We want to do it $1 million for the 2 years so that we can, as you saw, we had 2 potential applicants that requested the full amount. So this would open it up to more creative ways to bring in programs for indigent veterans. So this is a high impact. We've done the projections for our budget, and our budget from a 2.1 in 10 years, it goes down to about 200,000 using these strategies. We are constantly, yeah, sorry.
Question from
Uh,
our commissioner.
Oh,
I can wait till
Oh, okay.
okay.
it's done
Raise your
with
hand
this
twice.
page.
I thought you were excited.
Oh, no, I just wanted to be sure that you
Okay,
saw me.
all right.
So go ahead, Mark.
My bad.
So we're constantly refining the policies. We expand the limits. Just a few years ago, it was $800 for a single person for that year they could get. And I think it was a $1,500 for a family. That's not even we're not even gonna pay rent for that. So currently it's at for a single person, $2,500 and $4,000 for a family, and the VAB's looking at those numbers as well to see if we wanna extend those. And we're also making more veterans eligible based on income. So we're currently at 200% of the federal poverty guideline, which is really high in the state. So each county can adjust that. Most counties are anywhere between 100 and 150% of the federal poverty guidelines, and we're at 200% because the cost of living is so high here that we want to make sure that we don't leave people behind. And there's also a waiver process, so it's not black and white. There is a waiver process. It goes to the VAB, and if they approve it, it goes to the director for signature. And then marketing, as I talked about before, a lot of veterans don't know about our program, and they don't know about the Lacey Veterans Hub and all the great things that they do there. So the advisory board is really focusing on that marketing plan. And this, based on those strategies, this is the impact to the budget and how it's going to look each year. The community grant that's going to be a new strategy, as I was talking about. Habitat for Humanity, that's another program for adapting homes. It's not for purchasing homes or living, it's to adapt to their current homes, similar to the RFP. We also still provide $30,000 in operational costs to the Lacey Veterans Hub. We have the WDVA, the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, that we provide a service officer at the hub. Prior to us doing that, there wasn't a full-time person there. They were all volunteers, and they would come in kind of sporadically. There was never a Friday. And so this has been really successful in having somebody consistently there for veterans when they come in. We also provide up to $50,000 for homeless shelters. And then the direct services, right now we're about $275,000 to $300,000 what we put out in direct services, which is our core program, and that's what we've always done, is that direct service. There was a time when direct services, it would spend down that money each year, and it's because the property value is going up and the amount coming in, it hasn't kept up. All right, that's my last slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for this. So I have a couple questions, but first, I know Thurston County for many, many years, as well as the Association of Counties for many, many years. One of the things we've been advocating for is to separate the veterans levy as well as the developmental disabilities levy with separated from our general fund. And as it was moving this year, it didn't make it through, which brings me to my question on what is the projected revenue that the Veterans Fund has for this year?
The revenue that we believe is coming in, $781,000. And over the next 10 years, it goes up at that 10-year mark to 1.1.
Thank you. And so as kind of we're looking at the fund balance, so kind of the request that is going to come in front of the board in the future, or is going to be to kind of increase that community grant to 500 instead of the 250.
Correct.
I'm wondering, with some of the agencies that have already been chosen out, how did they get kind of separated from the community grant, like I'm seeing Habitat for Humanity. Not that I have, I'm just curious on how that happened, how those were separated.
So Habitat, we reached out, before we even thought about the RFP, we reached out directly to Habitat to see if there's a way, one, if there was a way to provide housing for veterans. You know, that's what we worked on initially, but trying to keep it in veterans' hands. So if they sold it, how do we keep it in veterans' hands? And that became a barrier, so we went instead with the repairing homes to at least to kind of bridge a gap. We're still working on the home part of it, we're just not sure how the contract language is really what it amounts to, I think.
Thank you. And I know the homeless shelter, right? That's one of the areas that sometimes the full funding doesn't get used. It really kind of depends. And so, with that piece, is it just a lack of marketing or partnering? Like why, I know there are several veterans who need the homeless shelter. So, it's always unfortunate to see that the funding doesn't get fully used. And so I'm wondering what have conversations been with the committee and how is that looking?
I spoke to Catholic Community Services yesterday, Erin York, and she's really confident that they're going to spend the entire amount this year.
Okay.
They've been partnering with some of the, I forget the organizations that she partnered with, but they're sending them directly to her for the shelter. So I believe that they will probably get really close to that limit. And she actually asked me if there was additional funding for them to expand. And she wasn't able to elaborate on that, so I'm kind of still talking to her about what that expansion means and if it means helping more veterans.
Okay, thank you.
And so I think what I'm hearing you say is that we have a fund balance and that, the forward thinking that we're gonna increase the community grants side to 500,000. Is there any reason we didn't decide to do that this year?
Just because it was our first one, and I'm very cautious. I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, having the right contract language and keeping it small, and then we can expand it if it's successful. We've tried some pilot programs in the past, didn't work out so well, and so I'm just cautious with it.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I think there are very specific restrictions with the Veterans Fund too, where I think that's been kind of some of the issues that the committee has read into before with their recommendations has been, how do we make this fit within all the guidelines that are set?
Right.
So.
And we did have that internal audit a few years ago, and there were some suggestions, and we ran with those, and so we want to make sure we're maintaining the requirements and the guidelines for those policies.
Yeah, finding that balance between spinning down and following proper process so we don't have another audit. I think Mark's done a nice job with that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. Next item, 2026-2027 Development Code Docket.
Thanks, commissioners. We have our CPAD director coming to the table. This is a big item and appreciate all the work that her and her team have spent dialing this in, and so we're ready to hand over.
Good morning. It is big.
So do you need the clicker or?
Oh, I will need the clicker, thank you.
I think it should work. If not, you might have to take center stage.
Great, and the clerk has a quick announcement to make.
We have an updated development code packet for you. It is the second packet that looks like this.
Yeah, and our apologies, we had to compile a lot of different docket project sheets and we realized that there was one missing, so it's referenced in the PowerPoint and we just wanted to make sure you had the associated.
So this is trash.
Second one.
So Amy, just to clarify, this is there's two in the packet, and this is replacing one of the two.
This is replacing one of the two, the second one.
The critical areas ordinance update.
That packet, yes, the development
Basically
code
that.
Okay.
So none of the other sheets got changed if you reviewed them previously. They're all the same. It's just we're adding the cannabis code amendment sheet in there to follow along with the. And they've all been available on our website as well for anyone following along. So we only do this every 2 years, which is why we reserve quite a bit of time because some big decisions to be made, at least as it pertains to CPED, and your workload. So today we're gonna go through, I think Commissioner Grant, you're the only one that hasn't gone through a docket process, and I think Commissioner Fournier and Commissioner Klaus were fairly new the last time we went through it. So we'll walk through that process and the timeline associated with it. We're gonna spend quite a bit of time going through the docket proposals. No decisions are to be made today on any of them, that'll come later. The only decision for the board today will be opening up a public comment period. So this is really an info share, an opportunity for you to ask questions. And of course, we'll talk about next steps. And as with all CPED presentations, you're welcome to ask questions throughout. You do not have to hold on to them till the end. So what are dockets? It's a really fancy way the state has come up with to explain what the work plans look like for the planning departments of all the jurisdictions, across the state. So we have two. We've got the comprehensive plan docket, and that's that once a year package that the board gets to consider. And so we just updated our comprehensive plan last year. That is like the big one that would fall in this docket. It also includes any joint plan update, sub-area plan updates. So joint plans apply to like our North County cities. Sub-area plans include things like Grand Mound, Rochester, Nisqually. And also changes to our comprehensive plan maps, sort of those visionary maps and zoning. We also have development code dockets. Now, these are rolling adoptions. The board can consider them throughout the year, and these are really regulations that impact folks on the ground. So you might have a particular zone applied to your property, and then the development code is the implementing ordinance for anything that you can do. So docketing is required by the state, so that's the why we do it. The process is defined in Title II. Per state requirements, there are opportunities for the public to weigh in and provide their feedback to you on what should be on the work plan. And this really gives the board an opportunity to align the work plan with a budget. So how many things do you want to put on that work plan? What do we realistically have resources to complete within that 2-year timeframe? And so here's a process slide. Something that's new this year is that we took the time to go to the Planning Commission. We planned on going to them in December, and then we got, there was that weather event and the power outage, and so we had to delay it till January. But information about the docket has been available on the website since December. And we held a meeting with the Planning Commission and walk them through the different proposals. And so what you'll see here are recommendations from them, whether to put items on the docket or to potentially hold off until a later date. In terms of your process, this is the opening work session to go through all the docket proposals. Hopefully you'll open up the public comment period, that 20-day requirement. Now that's just a written requirement. There's no public hearing associated with that. And then there'll be a final board discussion in April and a formal adoption of what that docket is. So as we're going through the proposals, I just want to highlight the decisions that you will be making in April so you can think about it and maybe even make notes for yourself. Because these will be your 3 choices for each proposal. You can add it to the work plan for 2026, 2027. And so what that means is that in my department, we start mapping out staff resources and timelines and project management plans for all of those. You can place it on hold on the preliminary docket, and that basically puts it in a holding position for future consideration on future dockets. So we wouldn't necessarily assign any staff resources within the next 2 years, but it would come back to you in 2028 for future consideration.
One sec, you see Commissioner Mitzer's hand.
Did not.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Mentzer,
I just wanted to ask on the slide where you were talking about the 20-day comment period and what the timeline looks like. So if commissioners, you're saying we open that now? What my question is, like, I know that like today is where the commissioners can maybe suggest other items, and would that go to the 20-day comment period? Or if it doesn't, then are we precluded from considering other things? Like, how does that all fit? Because that you said that's basically mid-March and we're almost there.
Yeah, if there are additional items that get added, we would just include those in the comment portal. And we would just open up the 20-day comment, like we would just give ourselves a week to make sure all those changes are made. And so we could set a date a week out. And we've got plenty of time. If we don't come back until mid-April, because there's a board recess, we've got plenty of time to still hit the required 20 days.
okay.
So the last bucket there is just removing from consideration. So it's really signaling this is not something that the board wants to consider now or in the next docket cycle. And so it would have to just either be a new application that gets submitted and or a new item that commissioners flag interest. So before we dive into the new projects, I just want to take a moment and big shout out to the board for everything that you reviewed and accomplished over the last 2 years. These were heavy lifts, both by my department, by the public that engaged, and you reserving a lot of time and mental space to consider. So on the comprehensive plan docket side, this happened in 2024, but we expanded the UGA and Grand Mound to expand opportunities for economic development and housing. We got our comp plan adopted on time because you set aside a lot of your own time to review that. In 2024, we also did an update to our agricultural policies and programs, including a zoning update for long-term agriculture. We got our capital improvement program adopted both years in the last docket cycle. And you also adopted the Black Lake Quarry Land Use Amendment and Rezone to support economic development opportunities. On the development code docket side, we got the preliminary action on the Shoreline Master Program. We got the forest lands conversion and tree preservation codes adopted, the most progressive ones in the state. You got your less restrictive alternative community housing code updated, your permit review process annual code updated, and code clarifications and corrections annual update. So just want to make sure that there's an acknowledgement of all the work that was done over the last 2 years. And then we're also ready to dive into another 2 years of big projects.
Ashley, so we don't move too fast over the accomplishment, how many counties, or do you know roughly, were able to pass their plan at the end of the year?
Oh, I've actually only looked at 2 in the last few weeks, and one made it, and one is still working. So Wacom is still working on theirs. Skagit made it. The cities barely made it within Thurston County, and then of the last cycle, I think there were only 2 counties that made it. So it's big.
And Commissioner Mentzer provided some historical context for me that when he came to the board, or maybe just recently, we were multiple years behind.
Right.
Josh, do you remember, was it like?
Yeah, we had more than 40 docket items that we needed to clear over the last 5 years, and then we got back on track after being 6 years behind in our submittals. And so we got back on track, and then this is the first time that we've submitted on time.
Yeah, that's
This is a big
amazing.
deal.
Go Thurston County.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley, and your team for your leadership and your hard work. And for the public record, in the midst of a budget reduction, in the midst of you coming up with creative funding strategies to look at, as the board directed, to look at how do you backfill some of that to keep providing service. Well done keeping the flow of work moving with interest.
Train on the track.
Yes, and that, you know, so one thing I will say that we did, that none of the cities did, we did a full environmental impact statement.
Say that again?
We did which was that is a huge workload that we took on that the cities didn't, but we'll be able to build off of that in the coming years to make other projects move faster.
We didn't do the economic development plan within the comp plan. Is that something that we could make a docket item, or is that something that we do elsewhere? Is that?
It is something that could be docketed on the comprehensive plan docket to update. There were 2 chapters that did not get updated in the comp plan. One of them was the economic development chapter and the other one was the public health chapter.
But there was a reason for that, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
it was because they had been recently updated and as we're looking at funding and kind of which strategies to go through those.
Both of those chapters would require us to probably hire consultants, so I think there was definitely a resource consideration and not adding those because they weren't required to be updated. As part of this last big periodic review. But that's where it would fit though, if the board decided that they wanted to pursue something like that, it would be a comprehensive plan docket item and we would have to identify resources, outside consultant resources to help with that.
Thank you.
Without further ado, here is what we have currently proposed for the 2026 and 2027 docket. And we tried to organize these, rather than asking the board to prioritize like 1 through 30 of all the projects, really just identifying 3 buckets. So what you'll see up there, the ones that we've identified as high priority, those are really mandatory items. We want to make sure that we are complying with all the new state laws and meeting all the new state guidelines. So if you see the blue mandatory, that's why. Medium is, there's usually like a funding component, like we've got grant funding in the works, and or there's a lot of community benefit or community interest. The lows are really just ones that are not mandatory, not required to do within this time frame. And it's really gonna be up to the board whether you wanna prioritize those. One other thing I wanna highlight, we're gonna be going through these one by one, so I won't spend too much on this slide, but one of the other things I wanna highlight is where you see asterisks moving through the presentation. Those are applicant initiated proposals. So dockets are a compilation of what the county wants to prioritize on my department's work plan, as well as there's the ability for applicants to say, hey, we want you to also consider our application. So good examples of that in the last cycle with the Black Lake Quarry. That is not one that the county initiated, that is one that the applicant, an applicant initiated. And so we've got a few of those also in the hopper in the next 2 years. So the first one, and this is one that is required, sort of under the umbrella of comprehensive plan updates, we maintain joint plans with Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater. We could not do this update with our comprehensive plan update because we were waiting for them. The joint plans really reflect everything that Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater have put in their own comprehensive plans. These have all been recently updated. The only changes that we foresee making are really gonna be limited to housing. The biggest lifts that the cities had in their own comprehensive plan updates were really complying with all of the new housing requirements. We're excited to take this on because we want to support that 5% rural growth goal that the board adopted. And this is one of the avenues to do it, making sure that growth can happen in the UGAs, working with our city partners. This one always has to be on the docket. I'm sorry to tell you, you can't take it off, the state won't let you. But with the new model for our capital improvement program, we only have to update it every 2 years. So this is not something you'll see in 2026, but you will see it in 2027, and it has to stay on the docket to make sure that we've got resources allocated to do it.
You wanna talk about the new model briefly?
Yeah, so we went from having a few hundred pages identifying like all the details of these projects that like as soon as you adopted it, they became outdated because things had changed. So we really went back to what is required under state law. Let's make sure that we're putting in the comp plan what is needed to support our capital facilities element. Also reducing the tremendous amount of resources that staff, the planning commission and the board spent on trying to get this done every year. So we checked in with legal counsel, we checked in with other jurisdictions and really right-sizing this for the community.
That whole process, again, was reviewed by Prosecuting Attorney's Civil Division. They helped advise and help create it to make sure that it was appropriate to legal process.
Yep, and I want to thank Public Works, spent a lot of time with us and legal counsel, making sure that what we've got complies with state law.
I see a hand from Commissioner Menser.
Thank you. I don't know if you were taking questions project by project, or I can save it if it's not that.
It's your
It's
call.
up to you.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was on joint plan and I had a major point of confusion when I joined the board, and I would assume that maybe some of the other commissioners, I'm still like not, I still have a little bit of confusion, and I would imagine maybe other commissioners have confusion. So when we talk about joint plans, because what I thought joint plans were when I joined the board was what I think is the development code side of it, and there is and we're going to get there, but like there's another item called joint plans on the development code side. So can you clarify for all of us, like when you say joint plans, there's two different things, and I'd like it to be really clear what this thing is versus what the development code piece is.
Yeah, I can give a specific example because at least my brain locks on to specific examples. So one of the updates you'd see in a joint plan that you won't see in a joint code are changes to your comprehensive plan, your land use designations or zoning. So an example of this is Tumwater, when they're having to comply with all the new state housing requirements, they changed what the zoning looks like in their residential zones. So they're gonna change the minimum number of houses that have to be built. And that's actually like written into their new land use designations. That doesn't live in the development code, that only lives in the joint plan. So we basically have to update a handful of housing policies and maybe land use designations in the joint plan so that framework is in place. So that then the board can consider updating the new regulations for those zones. And the new regulations would spell out, like, this is the minimum number of homes that you can build here, and this is where you can build them, and these are the different housing types that you can put on each one of those lots. And we have not we'll get to the joint codes, but whereas we do have pretty recently adopted joint plans, the joint codes are about 30 years overdue in most cases for an update, so that'll be a more significant update. Does
So
that?
you're going to use like that terminology of joint plan versus joint code so that we can kind of keep them separate.
Yeah.
And then code, and because the codes is like, okay, we're doing a project in the Lacey UGA, like, are we going to use, are we going to use the Lacey sidewalk requirement, or we're going to use Thurston counties? And there's reasons why sometimes we do one and sometimes we do the other, but having that all worked out makes permitting faster, and it's when the public is talking about it, they're really talking about that. This is more of a planning, higher level piece, which is important too. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify that because, like I say, there are two different things, and they're on both sides of the docket thing this year.
We are going to try to bring them forward together to the board so that we lessen the confusion. And you're only having to have one conversation. And you won't, as Commissioner Menser pointed out, you're not gonna see a lot of changes to the plans themselves. So the Nisqually Watershed Plan. So this is actually a sub-area plan. It has been on the docket for the request of folks in the Nisqually area. In working with the stakeholders in the Nisqually watershed, we're wanting to re-envision what the Nisqually sub-area plan looks like to be a full watershed plan. We've gotten support from the Nisqually River Council. We've heard support from staff from the Nisqually tribe. So this is really, trying to be responsive and adapt. And we think we can provide a lot more value to the community if we come out a bit and look at it from a watershed scale. We also have pursued grant funding for this, and so you'll see the up there, although this is not a required update right now, we did set it as a medium priority because, we got about if I remember correctly, it's about $180,000 for the technical work. We are calibrating a watershed scale model to do this work. It's really exciting and we can't wait to come share that with the board as well. But that's just an overview of this one. Any questions?
Commissioner Mensah?
Can you just say a little bit more about that? When you say calibrating a watershed scale model, what is it going to model exactly?
So this is a model that actually was created with funding from the EPA. It's called a Velma model. And it was actually a grant that the Nisqually tribe got a few years ago. And so we're using the same model and it can model land use patterns. So if we added 200 housing units in this particular location in the watershed, what would the ecological impacts potentially be? If we cut down this many trees in the watershed, what would the potential ecological impacts be? It's a pretty robust model to be able to look at different scenarios. And so what we'll be working with the community on are what are those scenarios they want us to take a look at. And then coming out of that work will be potential policy and code updates to support any given scenario. I hope I did that the Velma model justice. I don't even know what Velma stands for, so please don't ask what that acronym is.
Everyone's really excited about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's also very
Yeah.
exciting. Velma.
Yes, that is a great acronym though, I have to give them that. So this next one, and we're still working out, sometimes things get put on a docket because we think there might be policy updates, but we're not sure exactly what they are. So the comprehensive plan that was just adopted includes a brand new climate element. And it also includes a lot of action items in our new implementation plan. It is very exciting, and what we're doing right now is building a work plan within CPED, integrating the climate program manager's past work plan into our full department work plan to implement that. A few of the ones that we have identified that need to be potentially docketed are looking at natural resource-based climate mitigation efforts, any renewable energy project provisions, and we also have any kind of greenhouse gas emission reduction provisions. So this docket item is really leaving space to make sure that if that work plan identifies a need for some policy updates and or code updates, that we are able to bring them before the board and take action rather than waiting until 2028, 2029. And this one, this one has had and continues to have a lot of community interest. So one other benefit of having it on the docket is that it's very public that the board and or the county may prioritize this work. And right up there, you'll see the Planning Commission also stress the importance of resourcing this work moving forward. So now we're going to shift into the applicant-initiated proposals. So these are proposals that they're not coming from staff, they're coming from, property owners that would like the board to consider changes. This first one, which would be brand new this year, is applicant-initiated. It's down in Grand Mound, and they're asking whether the board would consider rezoning about a 5-acre parcel from arterial commercial to planned industrial development. As you can see from the map there, it is already surrounded by planned industrial development, and so it would potentially be compatible. This is part of a larger development proposal from this applicant, where they're wanting to actually do kind of a series of developments in this area of Grand Mound. The reason it has a low priority is simply because it's not mandatory. That does not mean that the board doesn't have to prioritize it. But we're not required to do it and don't foresee any grant funding. This is one that you're probably all familiar with. This actually was on the docket for the last 2 years. And so there's a request to keep it on the docket. This is applicant initiated. Would be a swap of land within the Tumwater urban growth area. And so it'd be removing 65 acres north of Black Lake and adding about 46 acres off of Old Highway 99. The land coming in would be rezoned to general commercial, light industrial, and multifamily. We set it as a low priority because it's not mandatory. Planning Commission actually recommends lowering the project's priority, maybe putting it on the preliminary docket and or removing it from consideration.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question on this one? I know there was legislator working its way through, like, are there any updates?
As far as we know, the legislation, it didn't meet the cutoff dates, and so that legislation hasn't been adopted by the state. There are other pathways. Our countywide planning policies do already consider land being taken out of UGA's, land being put in. However, at least is currently proposed, it would be using the state legislation, state UGA swap legislation. One of the reasons the Planning Commission recommend lowering the priority is because of just what they saw open-ended questions coming from new legislation, as well as potential updates to countywide planning policies or just other regional planning work being done, and so they weren't sure whether it was timely or not. Just to give you some insight into their conversation.
Commissioner Menzer?
I think I know the answer, but just to clarify, so the Planning Commission didn't have reference to the city of Tumwater's letter, which asked us to continue with this exploration of this item.
No.
Is that correct?
No, they
Yeah.
did not.
All right.
We also, this is actually a board initiated one. If you recall, there was it's an applicant initiated proposal that turned into kind of a board initiated broader scope of a proposal. So there was a proposal that we actually brought through the Planning Commission and brought to the board for a rezone along Marble Way, but it was a single site. As part of the Planning Commission's recommendation to the board, they had a recommendation both on that individual rezone, but they also asked the board to consider a broader zoning study along that corridor. Come to find out, the city of Lacey is looking at a larger scale zoning study along that corridor, in parallel with Thurston Regional Planning Council doing work along that corridor. And then, as you're also aware, there's an annexation study going on for that piece of the corridor and whether Lacey will be annexing it in the near future. So what the Planning Commission said along with for this one was that they do support the overall zoning study that the city of Lacey is doing. Their recommendation is to put this on the preliminary docket to sort of see how the annexation study and Lacey's zoning study play out, rather than the county potentially duplicating those efforts. Any questions before I go to development code? Because that's another long list.
Let's see.
All right. This one's exciting for CPED. I'll just say that. There are things that are, a lot of the stuff that's on here hasn't been touched in 30-some years. And so there's a lot of excitement within the department to go ahead and modernize some of these codes on behalf of our community. Same structure. The ones that are up at the top in blue that say hi, these are mandatory. We're required to do them. Medium are ones that have been identified by our team within CPED, and with planning commission feedback as being things that would help implement the comprehensive plan that just got adopted. And then low is, we have one applicant initiated one, and that's actually the new one that was in the packet that Amy handed out. So critical areas ordinance update, because this is a state mandated update, we have already started working on this with the planning commission. It is a full repeal and replacement of Title 24, and that's to reflect all the new requirements from the state agencies. We have a requirement to look at all the new best available science, so we're considering all of that. And then what we also hope to do is improve the overall transparency and predictability for the public. It is mandatory, so it's a high priority, and the planning commission supported that. They've been doing a great job going through all of the various sections of the critical areas ordinance, and we've had a lot of engagement thus far from the community on this project. This is the joint codes that go with the joint plans. So these are actually all the implementing regulations for our urban growth areas for Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater. So if you are wanting to develop in one of the UGAs, you actually go to a whole separate title of our code to find all the special provisions that apply. Hats off to our planning staff. They have to implement 4 different zoning codes. I don't know any other jurisdiction that has to do that, but that's what our team has to do. So there's basically a special zoning code for each UGA plus a zoning code for our rural areas. These are all about 30 years out of date, and what that looks like on the ground is we miss out on a lot of housing that could be built in these areas because housing wasn't a top priority in the 90s when a lot of these were written, unlike today. So tremendous opportunity when we update these to help support that 5% rural growth and really create easier permitting pathways for development in our urbanizing areas. This is something we've already briefed the Planning Commission on, and we'll be moving forward with in the next few months. The Shoreline Master Program. Preliminary action was taken by the board. This is a really interesting one. I have to say, as the county's planning director, board takes preliminary action and then it gets sent off to the state. And ours has been with the state for almost, it was like 1.5 years before they start giving us comments on it, and then it comes back for a final action. So this is gonna be coming back. Right now, we're sifting through just preliminary feedback from the state and trying to package it in a way that we can share it with commissioners. It is a high priority, it's a mandatory project. One of the positives, I would say, about it taking so long with ecology is that now we have a really unique opportunity to make sure it integrates well with our critical areas ordinance. Which is important, because if you're a property owner and you've got wetlands and you happen to be on the shoreline, it'd be awesome to just go to one section of our code to figure out the permits you need rather than multiple sections. So silver lining here is ecology took a long time and now we have a unique opportunity. So rural zoning code, I mentioned we've got 4 zoning codes our planners get to implement. This is the one that impacts all the rural areas outside of our North County UGAs, and it also includes Grand Mound and whatnot. This is also where a lot of our conservation policies live, as well as our right to farm policies, and our rural zoning code update encompasses a lot. What we're hoping to get docketed is a full repeal and replace of this very outdated set of provisions. And by doing that, we can update the structure, make it easier for the public to use as well as our team. We can clarify uses and standards, so any of those emerging uses that are coming up, we will be able to bake into this update. And then, of course, we're always looking to improve the transparency and predictability. We put up there again, this also will help support the 5% rural growth goal. It isn't mandatory, which is why it's a medium priority. But we are excited about being able to do this. Similarly, our subdivision code, so this is where all of our provisions about dividing land are housed. And this also hasn't been touched in a really long time. You know, we've made small tweaks along the way, but we haven't had a wholesale update in quite a while. There have been pretty significant updates to subdivision regulations in state law that we would want to integrate. And of course, we also just want to improve the usability of it. So this is TDR, PDR. These are acronyms. I know what the letters mean. And they're really important, especially on behalf of our farmers here in the county. They're transfer development rights and purchase of development rights. They are programs that the county has had on the books for a long time. However, we really haven't been able to stimulate a market for them and make these programs work for our rural landowners. We are finishing up a grant at the moment that has specific suggestions for how we might rework these so that we can have a market. And so that's why this is up here, is to really implement the next phase of that grant and try to get something better on the book. So this goes beyond Title 20 and also includes Title 17 and really goes towards supporting that broader conservation work.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Yeah.
I've been to, in years past, some work groups on TDR, and I mean, doesn't this, like, in terms of like the way a program is structured, don't you have to work with your cities because you're basically like selling density advances and things like that? I mean, how do we work on this by ourselves without like sort of a multi-jurisdictional work?
So we don't have to work with our cities. We can actually create a market within our rural areas. So there are things that if we are feeling development pressure within our rural areas, we could actually require the purchasing of a development right. So whether that is expanding beyond our impervious surface coverage, potentially buying development rights for additional units in a conservation subdivision. It's a rural to rural market rather than rural to urban. And rural to urban is really hard right now because it's difficult to even meet minimum densities with all the layers of regulations, notwithstanding buying even more development rights for density. So we would be one of the first in the state to try to create a rural to rural market. It's really exciting, and that's what we basically asked our consultants to do, is like, let's not think about the way everybody else has been doing this. Let's figure out a new way to do this.
And talk about the opportunity that is for our farmers and development in that area.
How this benefits our farmers. Yeah, so right now, the only eligible properties for transfer development rights are farmers that are currently have property in long-term ag zoning. So back in the 90s, when we changed the zoning of all these properties and basically said, hey, you're not gonna have as much value here, we're gonna downzone you. We said, but don't worry, you'll be able to sell your development rights on this market. You'll be able to recapture some of that value that was lost, except for a market never really came to fruition. So we have folks out there, and when we've been doing all this outreach for years with our property, or our farmers and property owners of ag land, they're like, hey, we're still waiting. We're still waiting, county, for the ability to sell these development rights and recapture that value.
That could be one of the single biggest values to our farmers, because it's all of a sudden creating, it's making up for the action that was taken when their properties were downzoned to keep them farms. It's creating an opportunity for them to have another source of income. It's exciting that Ashley is thinking creatively about how to stimulate that market and those folks with those interests, because it would actually incentivize keeping our prairie land as farms and them being viable. So it's huge.
Thank you. And maybe this is not the place, but you know, just reviewing the analysis, right? One of the relevant projects that it names is the Working Lands Conservation Strategy projects. And so I'm wondering for that one, if the project scope for the TDR, PDR program can expand into that working land piece of things, or would it have to be a separate docket item?
I don't think it needs to be a separate docket item. So the docket is required under the Growth Management Act, so anytime we're touching our codes, regulations, our zoning, it needs to be on one of these lists. The bulk of the work coming out of that grant is programmatic. So how are we structuring our habitat conservation program? What do we want to do with conservation futures moving forward? What should cost share look like for voluntary stewardship programs? So there's a lot of other programs that fall outside of the, the Growth Management Act. So it doesn't have to be on these lists, but that doesn't mean that they're not priority initiatives that our departments.
So would the conservation futures dollars be what are used to purchase the development rights?
They could. That grant actually looks at a number of different funding mechanisms. And that is something that I've had a preliminary conversation with Josh to talk about bringing a presentation before the board here in the next few months as we get the final reports from the consultant. So conservation futures is one. There are others though, that might even, have a bigger return on investment. So I would say we looked at it. I don't think it needs to be docketed, like we have enough in from the consultant to know that this is where most of the code work is. Because a lot of code work was done in last docket cycles to update the long-term ag zoning, update agritourism, on that side of it. And since Title 20 is where all that stuff is housed and we have a Title 20 update on the docket, we could catch any of those other items through that process. So we also have standing docket items. This was an innovation that the board created in the last docket round that allows us to be more nimble and responsive to emergent changes in law or emergent uses like LRA that sort of just pop up and you're like, oh boy, we don't want to have to go open the docket to be able to address this. So our standing docket items are our permit review process, new uses and related standards, and code clarifications and corrections. As we did last docket cycle, we scope these in a public setting with the Planning Commission. So as we're looking at what kind of permit review, what would be within that permit review process docket item, we would go to the Planning Commission and say, okay, does this look right? And bring it forward. So ones that we already know are gonna be in there is that the board has identified ADUs. That we're tracking the changes that were made to accessory dwelling units out in our rural areas. And so as we're tracking that and watching the numbers, if there are any changes that need to be made, they would fall within this bucket. And then there's other items that emerge. So the cannabis-related code amendments, this was something that was docketed last go-around. The standalone item, we did not get to it. We did not have staff resources available to work on it. It isn't mandatory. And it sounds small, but this touches so many different areas of Title 20 that not only is it a pretty big planning project, but we also, and we imagine there's gonna be a lot of community interest just looking at past updates to cannabis-related code amendments. In talking to the applicant, because there is a cost associated with it being an applicant-initiated one, they are open to it, open to the planning commission recommendation of this being pulled into the overall Title 20 update, because that's where this lives. And so that would just be one of those items, that as we're going through the full modernization of Title 20, we would make sure to integrate some of these pieces.
Thank you. So, in terms of, this one, you know, I think the planning commission recommendation, is definitely, you know, I don't disagree with it. I'm wondering, also with, you know, the replacement of the term, I think it might be just, you know, thinking out loud. This definitely would be a good area to engage our, equity commission on. Because there are a lot of, you know, there's definitely feelings around, you know, just kind of the cultural context of marijuana, but also what it's been turned into, right, through different, how it's been villainized, right? But then there's also that kind of cultural piece, and then just switching it to cannabis, and I know there's been movement, so just, I think this would definitely, if it moves forward, be a good one to definitely engage with our equity.
That's a good suggestion. Okay, so remember that bucket that was the on-hold bucket? This is the slide that summarizes what got placed on hold during the last docket cycle. So we're gonna revisit them as part of this one, and the board will get to decide whether to keep them on hold, go ahead and add them to the docket, or remove them entirely from the docket. And so each one of these has what we identify was sort of the proposal and the sticking points, because we have done some preliminary work for these. At the top there, you have a land use amendment and rezone. It would be proposing a more intensive residential use in the Black River corridor. Those were considerations that the board referenced when they placed it on hold, rather than putting it on the docket. The fireworks provisions, as well as the no shooting zones listed up there, these fall outside the Growth Management Act, so they actually don't live within any of our land use codes. But there is a lot of community interest in here, and what CPED's role would be supporting probably the sheriff's office in updating their relevant sections of the code. And then the last one up here, the Natural Landmark Program, this was something that was on the docket. We did preliminary work, specifically working with legal counsel, ran into quite a few challenges related to legal risks and administrative costs, and that is what influenced it being placed on hold this last go around. So just for a little bit more detail, this is the land use amendment and rezone request. This is a property owner initiated proposal, and it would be rezoning, trying to remember the exact amount, apologies. Rezoning 54 acres that you can currently only build 2 houses on to RRR 15, so that would increase it to about 10 homes. So it'll be 1 house per 5 acres instead of 1 house per 20 acres. This is the fireworks provision, so also applicant initiated. It doesn't fall within the Growth Management Act, so it doesn't have to be docketed. But CPED would be able to provide support in terms of bringing this forward to the board. It will, because it's not Growth Management Act related, it would not have to go through the Planning Commission. This is something that would go straight to the board. Planning Commission did vote to remove the proposal from the docket just because it isn't a Growth Management Act item. This Natural Landmark Program, this is also applicant initiated. It's creating creating a conservation program specifically for the county to hold easements for very like small pieces of property. Which is it's expensive for the county to do that. It would be establishing a new program that we would have to identify funding for. There's also a number of just potential legal risks associated with that, because if you think we're now holding interest in potentially a half an acre here, an acre there, and whenever you hold interest, you also are required to defend those easements, and make sure that you're protecting them from encroachment and whatnot.
This would be like a historic tree or something.
Yep, it'd be like for a stand of trees that someone wants to protect, and so legal counsel advised that there's a lot of conservation programs out there. There are other ways to protect, private interests like stands of trees rather than a new county program.
Thank you. I'm wondering, is the applicant still engaged on this one? Is this something?
Yep, they're
Okay.
still very interested in having, and we have explored other options. The land trusts are also not interested in holding easements that are this small because of the costs associated with it, and whether there are endowments in place and whatnot for that continued responsibility.
And we've added him to other avenues to achieve the goals that he's trying to achieve.
Yeah.
He's chosen not to take those avenues.
Thank you.
So planning commission has voted to remove the proposal from consideration, just given those challenges that we shared. No shooting zones, this is very similar to the fireworks provisions. CPAD would be available to support, but this is something that we'd be looking to the sheriff's office or others within the county to put together what a proposal would be to the board. And it wouldn't go through the planning commission.
This falls under the public safety code,
Yes.
not the land use code.
Fine.
What is this one trying to accomplish related to no shooting zones?
I can answer that. So all three of these are citizens that I've been working with since my very first day on the board, so like 8 years. The fireworks issue, that citizen is still extremely engaged. The landmark program, similar. The no shooting zone one, I haven't heard from that constituent in quite some time. It was based on a situation that was going on at Black Lake, where there's boating allowed there and jet skiing and whatnot, and there was somebody that was like basically a professional jet skier and was doing training and was being like shot at, because there's also like duck hunting allowed. So there's a real conflict, at least on Black Lake, between shooting rules and recreation rules. And videos were shown to me of like people standing on their docks, and like there were like hunters were coming in through, duck hunters were coming in. And so anyway, I did a whole bunch of research back in like 2019 about like who's got jurisdiction here and how would this even, like if the board wanted to do something about it, how would we do it? It was kind of like a lot of rabbit holes of dealing with fish and wildlife, and Josh was CPAD director at the time. I worked with his staff. Tom Cena was helping me. I mean, we did a whole bunch of stuff and with legal counsel, only to kind of determine that the only thing we could really do was put it on the docket and have it like sort of studied and like proposals worked through. So I threw it out there at the time, and the board decided to put it on the preliminary docket, and it's basically just sat there. And it's definitely a thorny thing. Commissioners way before me, there was like issues going on back on the marine shoreline, and the commissioners tried to establish like a 200-foot or something, because there was hunting going on like right near people's homes, like within stone's throw of the shoreline, and there was a bunch of residents that were really upset about that. So I remember that from the Olympian articles before I was a commissioner. So shooting zones have come up, but just to answer Commissioner Klaus's question, it really stemmed from trying to make sure nobody gets killed on Black Lake, because from the videos I was seeing, there was a real conflict between what duck hunters were allowed to do and what recreational people were allowed to do, and there was a real conflict there. And I don't know if there's any way for us to resolve it, but that's that was the issue.
So the conflict was because there was a professional jet skier that was out jet skiing during duck hunting season, which would be an atypical kind of thing, except for that person's year-round use. It's not, is that?
Yeah, I mean,
You wouldn't typically be out recreating on cold water unless you were a pretty diehard jet skier, I would think.
yeah, I mean, you know, there were some videos of like people standing at the end of their docks, like on a fishing boat and stuff in that season, and like really close by, like shooting, and that you could see on the video. So yeah, there's more recreational than just like swimming. I mean, people go out there to fish, and I don't know what, it's been too long. I don't remember what all the rules are, but I do remember there was conflicts that from my perspective, somebody needed to resolve. I didn't know if it was the Board of County Commissioners or the state, but it seemed like there was a real issue to be addressed. So that's why we threw it on the preliminary docket, but we had never had the staffing or resources to really to prioritize it.
And we haven't heard back from them recently either, is that correct?
I think the constituent that I initially was initially working with got so frustrated that they moved. So I don't think they're actually there anymore, but the conflict still exists in the rules.
Is it?
That's perfect, thank you.
Is your hand still up?
So our budget situation is top of mind in CPED. We also want to be able to successfully deliver on the work plans that the board gives us, so we can build on those successes. And so this slide is really just to highlight our estimation of how long it would take us to complete all of the projects in here. Would be 8+ full-time staff. We really only have 7 FTE available, and that's just like pieces of multiple people. We have lost capacity over the last few years. The reason we even have 7 up there is because we've gotten a lot of grant funding the last 2 years to support different projects that you see here. But because we have grant funding, that means that like we can work on those projects, but we can't necessarily work on other projects. And so this could be a different picture depending on, you know, what the board priorities are. But at a minimum, we definitely are missing at least 1 full-time person to complete all of the projects listed here. Another thing I wanted to highlight, and I think this is just the beginning of a conversation, but we in CPED really want to come up with a timeline for our annual comprehensive plan package. So that big once-a-year decision that you have to make that does not overlap with your budget discussions. And so if we don't have full control over timelines, because, you know, our planning commission might request additional work sessions, or there might be, you know, high community interest that plays into this. But to the extent that we can, our goal this year and next year is to try to get to you in late summer, early fall, so that your big decision on that once-a-year package is in the October timeframe, which would give you space to really drill down and have the budget discussions that you need to have, so.
Yeah, I think that's a great process improvement. Those of us at the table from staff were noticing a convergence of a number of really important, dense topics. We thought the commissioners did an amazing job jumping into all of those, but we do also recognize and acknowledge that there were a lot of comments from commissioners about wanting more time or needing more time because you have a ton of budget information, which has its own thick packets, and then you have all of this content. So there's a way for us to stagger and not slow down, but to stagger the importance of the conversations and give you some breathing room. We appreciate Ashley for thinking that through and working with Josh and Summer on what a calendar could look like.
So that's why we have already kickstarted the joint plan updates with the planning commission, so that we can hopefully get to the board by late summer. So next steps, the big action today is just opening up the 20-day comment period. There also, I know Commissioner Menzer mentioned, if there are any commissioner items that you would like to discuss so that we can make sure that we get the docket project sheets ready and are collecting comments on those as well. I'll just kind of open it up.
There we go.
Ready? Okay.
I don't know about that.
Thank you, Ashley. And, just not a surprise to you, I've already kind of sent out an email and I know we're meeting, but I did kind of, I do have a couple. And so, and this for me is in no priority order, but definitely want to give these options to the board to see if there is an interest to, add to that 20-day public comment. I would for sure would want to add it. The first one is in regards to the code compliance update. I know we have a briefing this afternoon, but Title 26, it's been a while since that title has been updated, and particularly around enforcement procedures, timelines, penalties or compliance tools. And, of course, if there's any clarification on any related provisions live in other titles, I think that should be also considered in tandem. But that for me is one that has come up over the years. I want to see what ways we can, I know CPET's code compliance team is very small but mighty. But it's definitely been an area where I know there's been a lot of public concern and comment about it and how it works. And so that's something where I would like to open it up. My next item is in regards to the tree ordinance and forest land conversions piece. And kind of one area that I noticed is that, and I've received comment about it from the public is, when we went through that update recently, it was for the rural areas. There's probably a piece where it doesn't apply to the urban growth areas. And so kind of like opening that up and seeing that scope. I know Commissioner Menster probably has, it's something that he's also been working on. We received kind of the same comment, and so I'll let him expand on that piece. My next piece is in regards to the Working Lands Conservation Program. And so again, I'm wondering if that can be, if it doesn't have to be an additional item, I would just want to expand the scope that where it explicitly says that under the TDR, PDR, that is going to be part of the scope, if that's, and if not, then, having it as a separate item. My next piece is in regards to data centers, and I'm wondering whether this specific piece can be, kind of my concerns. It's, I think it should be around water use, energy demand siting criteria, environmental impacts, and infrastructure capacity. Maybe it can be folded into the critical areas ordinance, Title 20. Maybe that's kind of just a smaller piece of that broader conversation. And then I know maybe this is not maybe a priority because things are still very much being updated and changing at the federal level, but it's the battery energy storage systems. And, I know that updates are still evolving and standards are evolving, so are safety considerations. Fire protection requirements are definitely one of them, but maybe it's just an item that, it's not worked on this year, but we just keep an eye out to see like what is coming down and seeing whether it's something that we need to update. And then my last piece is the federal detention centers and jails, and understanding whether there is any authority at the county level to regulate or address the siting through development code provisions and determine whether additional siting criteria, infrastructure standards, buffering requirements, or public process enhancements are warranted. I know that, these kind of projects fall under the essential public facility provisions at the state, level. So, again, I'm not sure if this is a docket item. We do have a conversation, under commissioner items today, where it's a proposal for a moratorium, but wondering if, there could be additional rules, in regards to this. So, how many items? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, yeah, that's me.
Happy to respond to those, but I don't know if there were others as well.
Commissioner Mensah has a hand up.
Okay, if I could just go back and ask one question and then I'll get to so on that side, when you said 8 FTEs needed to do all the work listed, do you mean like all of the things you just went over, including the low priority? I didn't really understand that.
Yeah, basically a budget sheet that looked, a roll-up of all of the projects. We tried to estimate the amount of staff time, and so anywhere from 0.1 staff time for some of the smaller ones where we're just providing support to 2 FTE for climate programs. But basically 8 FTE total, and that's just pieces of different people on my team.
Okay, well, so I had a few things here, but Commissioner Mejia pretty much covered all of it. But I do want to say the ones that I was interested in was, again, the Working Lands Conservation Program. I mean, my understanding is that the TDR, PDR is a piece of what the Planning Commission and your staff have been working on. But I don't think that's a really interesting, I mean, I learned something about that today, that this rural to rural idea, and that seems interesting, but like in terms of a broader effort to stop farmland, loss, I think that's an interesting strand of it, but I think there's more to it, and there's been more teed up by Planning Commission and community members and staff. So I was just, my question is the same as Commissioner Mejia's, like, is that the right scope? The tree ordinance is the one that I'm focused on, because what I had heard, just expanding again on what Commissioner Mejia said, is that people are coming saying, well, look what's happening. Like your tree ordinance is flawed. Look what's happening in this UGA, because there's a subdivision like hole. And I ran into staff, the former staffer from Thurston County who helped you with this one, and I was just grilling her about it, and she was like, no, it's not that there's a hole in that ordinance. It's that there's an update needed to the subdivision UGA code that's kind of a companion. So she's like, if you're interested in addressing that quote unquote hole, you want to prioritize the update to the UGA subdivision code. So I don't know if that fits into any of the items you listed through, or if that's a separate thing, but that's something that I'm interested in including if it's not. And then the last one is just on the federal detention centers. I mean, I don't believe that we have the latitude. If we're going to do something, I don't think we can wait for a 2-year docket process. So I'm hoping our conversation later this morning will show us other avenues beyond this. But, if that were to have to be the way it goes, then I'd be interested in that as well. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
This is exciting, lots of ideas. I do appreciate that Commissioner Mejia did share those earlier, so I do have some feedback in terms of where they fit in this overall docket discussion. In terms of the forest lands conversions and tree preservation provisions, those can be addressed in two of the docket items that are already up there. So the rural subdivision code update that's up there for Title 18 would address any type of forest lands conversion. So basically cutting down trees because you're trying to create lots for housing. So that's already in there, and that is one of the pieces that would be included in that docket project without it being called out as a completely separate project running in parallel with Title 18. We do want to try to reduce that duplication and that work for the Planning Commission and you. So that's one piece. That's in the rural area when you have a subdivision. Within the UGAs, that's the joint code update. So it creates a lot of confusion if we have separate tree standards that the cities don't have. So working through the joint code is where we would sit down with the cities and say, like, what do you have on your books? What do we have on our books? And rather than creating a whole separate docket item for just one piece of what goes into all the regulations for development within the UGAs. And the cities have been doing a great job in the last few years. You've got Tumwater who's working on an urban forest management plan and the code updates. I know Lacey adopted more recent tree preservation standards. And so we'd just be building on the work they're already doing, and it's probably more fitting to an urbanizing environment than the kind of work we've been focused on, which is a rural environment. So I think the tree piece could be addressed with docket items that are already up there, and we could just make it clear on the docket project sheets that these are things that the board wants to make sure are included in those conversations. The best facilities, data centers, and even federal detention centers or anything like that that pops up, there are two potential avenues for that. They could either be addressed through like our Title 20 update, so the wholesale modernization of our rural zoning code, or if that's not moving fast enough, just because of our staff resources, we could move it faster with just the new uses and standards standing docket item. Like, these are emerging uses, and we want to make sure that we're positioned well as these proposals come in the door to address them. We already have draft code for the best facilities. It is a very emergent new industry, and so we're still working with our regional partners on what that might look like. But, you know, a lot of these things we're already working on, and it's just a matter of like putting it into the docket item that's moving the fastest, if the board has an interest in that.
You said this was for through the rural conversion or the Title 20 update?
It can be Title 20 update and or our standing docket item for new uses and standards. And that's really what that's intended for, is like, ooh, there's something that we hadn't even thought of, and we're concerned about how we're going to address it here in Thurston County. The Working Lands Conservation Program, that's really up to the board. We had initially actually proposed it as a bigger docket item. The Planning Commission didn't have a lot of interest in sort of the bigger piece. It wasn't well defined because we've done so much work on ag. The piece that we have not touched is the development rights piece. So we tried to focus it in, and because it included Title 17 and wasn't going to be covered in any of the other docket items, we wanted to call it out separately. If the board wants to expand it for potential opportunities that emerge, we could do that. Just know that we in CPED haven't identified any further updates to like our code and policies beyond just the development rights one. We got a lot of programmatic work we're trying to put in place and focusing on that, since we've already done a lot of work on the policies and codes in the last 4 years. And I think the last one was the compliance code update. And I would just say if you want to hold off on making a decision after the presentation today, we could still incorporate it. There's always opportunity to make improvements to our code. But to just give you a little teaser, what we're trying to do right now is just use all the tools that are there. There are a lot of tools actually in Title 26 that just haven't been activated. And so until you activate them and figure out what the challenges are, what the barriers are, it's hard to figure out what those code updates would look like.
And I think that not only activating them, but then activating them in partnership with our legal team, and then working to get a very clear definition of what is needed to be supported, to move forward, and be defended. So the presentation is at 1:30 today. It dovetails nicely into this conversation.
So as far as adding or suggesting things, is that we're just throwing things at you right now? Is that separate meetings you'd like to have, like with commissioners, or is that something we need to vote on, or what does that look like best?
No decision now.
Okay.
Well, if we're gonna open up a comment period, we'll wanna make sure we're collecting comments on the full range of proposals that the board is considering. And so if we're not getting board direction now, then we would have to schedule a fall board session to set the comment
So
period.
you gave an opportunity for each one of Commissioner Mejia's items to be wrapped into what we already have
Mhm.
being posted.
Mhm.
So what more would need to be posted?
Only the code compliance one if the board wants to add that one. The other ones, I think, could just be small amendments to our existing docket sheets.
For me, the Title 26 conversation is really important, and I'd definitely like to be able to have that.
I agree.
So you could hold until after the 1:30 to receive direction?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, does the board feel comfortable with the other items that were brought up just being sort of noted in our docket project sheets for the public to comment on?
But that includes putting those three, the best facilities, the detention facilities, and the data centers on the emerging issues.
It would be a new uses and standards docket item to include but not be limited to these particular items. And we're basically just signaling to the community that these are, at a minimum, the board will probably be considering these in the next 2 years, but there might be others as well. And then the planning commission would give us feedback on that as well.
Do we have a general consensus on going that route? Okay. I like it.
I'm okay as long as you add what you suggested about the tree element to, and I'm specifically interested in the joint code, how it would apply in the UGA.
Okay,
So the public is aware that that will be addressed. Or could be. I mean, that the proposal is that it might be addressed within that docket piece.
So, so what we'll do is kind of put a comma here, and then we'll jump in at 1:30. The board can finalize so that staff can move on to the next steps. Do you need any more clarity, Ashley?
nope, we will also be asking, the follow-up action, once we get direction, is to just open up that comment period. And I'll have a specific date, this afternoon as well, because it won't be this week. We would want to wait till next week so we have time to make those updates.
I want to acknowledge the amazing amount of work that went into these two packets, how detailed they are. When I first got here, I didn't see this level of staff work, and so to be able to provide that to the commissioners this early, we recommend that commissioners, as you look through this, if you have any questions, just note them. And Josh and Ashley and the team are happy to follow up and sit down and go into more detail.
Yeah, well, and I would be remiss not to point out Anna, a rock star on our team that did all of this work. So she developed the templates, put them all together, prepped me.
Good job, Anna.
So yeah, it is a lot of work. It's really important work. So thank you for taking the time to.
And I also wanna recognize the fact that this was sent out, like, that not only was this amazing work and extremely helpful for especially me as the newest person to this, but the fact that it was sent out like quite a while ago and that I was able to give this a good read, like a week or two. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much for your work on this.
Kudos. I mean, I don't think it can be overstated how significant this is, just in terms of your operations as a department and understanding what's the work that needs to be done and what's the staffing level to do that work. And it seems really simple, but it's not happening in some areas. And so showing it can be done with knowledge, we're like, thank you, James. That's really, really impressive.
Yeah, we're geeking out over it
Yeah,
because
it's really
organizationally,
impressive.
stuff you need to put in place as you're charting down the road, all the different priorities, and to do that helps the policymakers really understand what we're getting into and why it's so important.
It's difficult operational cuts. You found ways to continue your operations. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be back at 1:30.
Okay. Next item, commissioners' items. We have an item from Commissioner Mejia.
Yes, thank you.
And then I think the clerk has a quick announcement.
We have an additional ordinance from Commissioner Mejia to provide for your consideration today.
Great. Thank you. So, the ordinance that was attached, in the packet was, it's a different, ordinance, than, the one I had initially sent out. So kind of what I'm asking the board, today, is, basically a moratorium on, regarding federal facilities. And it's something that I have, started discussing with, Travis, in regards to strategy and, what can be done. As we know, this is a trending issue, that is, basically, happening in Washington State, with, the expansion of federal facilities and them looking for, federal government looking for areas. And so, you know, I have drafted something up. I did this based on Howard County as well as Baltimore County ordinance that they passed. And yesterday, King County actually also passed a moratorium. And so this is my proposal. What I'm asking today is basically to direct the county manager to review the draft ordinance regarding the federal facilities moratorium with the prosecuting attorney's office, and then kind of bring back a final version for the board to approve.
Commissioner Grant?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward, Commissioner Mejia. I know that we chatted about it at some point too, but this is really great. I have just one question about section 4. So it says on the back of this, the moratorium shall remain in effect for 6 months. Is that what the Howard County is doing, or is that, just wondering about that timeline?
So that is actually based on RCW and how much we're able to actually hold a moratorium in effect. I did try to extend it to 12 months, and I did, that was a hard line that Travis drew with me, that, you know, he was like, no, it's not something that you can amend. Basically, the board will just have to make an extension once those 6 months are over. So, yeah, I did try to play with that as well.
Right, so then I think that's great, and I think that maybe, I mean, just to piggyback on that, to give direction that we'll revisit it in 6 months. Great.
So I'll move to direct county manager to review both of these proposed ordinances administratively and legally. What?
Oh,
You're stopping me?
yes, just let me, I guess, I will clarify on the kind of the second ordinance, and I know that there is also like staffing constraints, right? And so this was something the chair, you know, kind of brought up to me yesterday. So I was busy while I was at NACO. And so, you know, I sent in, and I apologize for the confusion of the two ordinances. So I had sent the first one, the moratorium, over to staff. And then just kind of based on conversations with King County and kind of what they've done, you know, kind of brought up the second ordinance. And, you know, we just saw kind of recently that the city of Olympia also kind of moved that forward. Based on timing and staffing constraints, I guess my request right now would be just to move forward with the moratorium. And then once we kind of get through that, maybe we can bring it in the second ordinance.
Okay.
This is, again, just a proposal kind of based on the model that King County has done. County manager or Chair Menser, does that sum up kind of the conversation and kind of the request?
I think that'd be great, Commissioner Mejia. I think it would allow us time to focus on this with the PAO's office and the clerk, and we can queue that up for the board. Once that's done, then we can have a discussion and agendize a similar discussion for the other concept.
Okay, then I move to direct the county, what, did we have more?
I don't know. Chair Menser unmuted himself.
I'm good. I would defer to county manager in terms of how to smooth it through in terms of the most, yeah, so I'm fine.
I move to direct county manager to provide administrative and legal review of draft ordinance regarding a federal facilities moratorium with prosecuting attorney's office and provide options for the board consideration.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion? I just want to note that this is not any kind of final decision. These ordinances would have to go through a lot of other process. There'd be plenty of opportunity for public comment and review of this proposal. So this is just the first step.
And I just wanna just reiterate, how grateful I am to Commissioner Mejia for bringing this forward at this point in time, and I feel that it's necessary as we move forward, and I feel, with other counties kind of taking the lead, that we'll be able to get this done for our county as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
I'm an aye. I just didn't get my volume up.
Last item is commissioner reports and committees.
Sorry.
I gave one
I'm out.
last night. Does anybody have anything on reports, committees? All right, then we're going to adjourn.
Thank you.